For me, I wouldn't consider myself an AI disciple. I'm not one of the people who is like losing their minds over it. I can't remember the topic we used as a case study, but we had it tested with a sort of a subject expert, and they were pretty impressed with the results it came back with. Yeah, obviously, before you delve into any AI technology, make sure your company will probably have an AI policy. If not, then maybe recommend they get one and then follow that,
Yeah.
obviously.
So, hey, Danny, we're going to have a chat today about some AI tools and how that's impacting workflow and webinar production. Um, so, just to start off, what are some of the main challenges that you run into as a webinar host when you're managing the whole process of producing a webinar?
Yeah, good chat with you today. Well, pretty similar to sort of the challenges that a lot of marketers will experience when they're sort of project managing any sort of campaign. So the number one thing is time is obviously a big challenge. There's a lot of moving parts. You've got lot of different stakeholders. It could be design teams who are creating the promo graphics. You've got your dev team who might be working out how you're connecting your platform to your Salesforce or whatever CRM you're using. You've got account managers at your webinar software who are usually on hand to help out with things. Then the most important thing probably is your speakers. So whether or not they're internal or external, that can pose different challenges. The moderators, the hosting, the audience, of course, and then the rest of your marketing and sales team. So, yeah, a lot of moving parts, and that's a big challenge when it comes to managing the workflow. The other thing, which maybe not everyone thinks of, is sort of the pressure that's involved with it. So you've got pressure hosting the event if you're going to do that. You've got pressure from people who are in charge of the money. If you've spent a bit of money on a platform or you've spent a bit of money on a sort of third party provider, you've got pressure to prove ROI on that. And then, of course, as marketers, we've always got pressures from sales teams to generate the types of leads that they can convert. So yeah, there would be the three main challenges for me: time, lots of moving parts, and the sort of the pressure involved in hosting and managing your webinars.
Yeah, definitely. So we're talking about sort of how the new AI technologies, new AI tools that have started coming out over the last year or two could impact the workflow of producing webinars. How do you think they could assuage some of those pressures um, and sort of make producing webinars more efficient or more effective?
Yeah, so for me, I wouldn't consider myself an AI disciple. I'm not one of the people who is like losing their minds over it. I think there is still a bit of element of confusion about use cases. We've had the sort of the hype, haven't we? And now
Mhm.
everyone's sort of tried it out. A lot of people have now just sort of forgotten about it and sort of wondering, okay, everyone keeps talking about this. What is it that I can actually do in my day to day to save me time? For me, that's the big thing. I'm always want to look at ways we can streamline anything. So if there's a tool there that can help us do our job more efficiently, um, then that's what I want to look at. And at the moment, anything that can save me time, I'm going to try it out, and I'm eager to learn more about it. Which I'm guessing, I don't know if you feel the same about it, or if you're more of an AI disciple. Well, you don't strike me as a disciple, who's someone who's going to follow the hype to the complete extent.
Yeah, I think I'm with you that like a bit of balance is important. It's like obviously it is something of a the beginnings of a paradigm shift in terms of how many types of work get done. Um, but yeah, I think there's a handful of use cases where the AI tools, largely the sort of large language model based AIs, those kind of tools. There's a few use cases where they've proved themselves and where they do work, and there's others where they're either simply not designed for it. They don't really sort of fit what you're trying to do, or they could get there, but it's going to take a lot more work to make them actually useful to where it's not just causing you more stress fixing their work or double checking what they've done. And I think particularly when you come to what we do with video production and like when it comes to live events, like there's really only so much that the AIs can do. I think those are probably like examples of both of those where if it's a live event, how much is AI actually going to do for you? There's a limit to what you can use it for. And with the video production, we can, you can see where it's going. Like potentially that's going to become very powerful, but the tools that we have that are readily accessible right now aren't quite there. So you end up working around them quite a lot, or what we're doing, which is using them pretty selectively, like only in a few sort of places. Are there any main sort of tasks that you found so far that is, specific things within the process of setting up a webinar where it's been helpful, where you found a good use case?
So yeah, maybe one that people haven't thought about. So one of the reasons why we're exploring it a lot more was sort of our platform providers have built in a sort of AI chatbot which helps with the setup process. So when you're setting up an event, there can be lots and lots of different settings you've got to make sure you've got right, and you've got an AI chatbot. It's basically a event setup assistant, which has been pretty handy. To be honest, if you've forgotten you've got a time zone wrong or something like that, it will just pop up um, with a pointer. So things like that, I think it's really useful. In terms of other workflows, I think we'll get into a bit more later on when we take it sort of the different aspects of stuff. But what I'm sort of mainly excited about is, yes, it's going to help us over time, but I'm keen to see how the big players, specifically in the webinar arena, so you're at Zooms, you're on 24s, those sorts of companies, the ones who have got the bandwidth and the finance backing to be able to really test new stuff out.
Mhm.
It's going to be interesting to see how they develop, because like you said, there has been a bit of a hype. There are definitely lots of positives coming out of it. Obviously there'll be a few negatives along the road, a few bumps along the road as well. um, but overall it is here to stay, I think, and slowly but surely it will become more and more part of our sort of daily workflows. And yeah, we want to keep on top of that. We're in a pretty good position where we can try things out and sort of find different use cases for different things. So yeah, we're pretty excited to be trying them.
Yeah, I think what you said about the chatbot that you use essentially is built into the platform that you use. I think we'll probably see more and more of that, where the platform providers are adopting AI and building it into their tools. So it's not necessarily something you even need to. We'll need to consciously shift and go, oh, let's use AI for this part of the workflow. It's just going to more and more show up, as the platform providers and the people making the tools that we use, as they figure out how to use it and how to integrate it with their service. It's just going to be there. And we're just like, oh, we have this now and we can use that. And it's just going to, as you say, make that process easier, double check things, take away some of like the sort of some of the manual work and sort of the technical elements of like, is the formatting set up right? Have you got, all the data that you need, that, the sort of those kinds of things that AI is really suited for when it's set up right. And it's, doing that sort of thing as a user and trying to get it to integrate with a platform that you're using. If you're using something separate, like just using ChatGPT and then trying to interface it with a webinar platform, you'd probably run into like as many problems as you would just doing it yourself, because it's
Exactly.
not
There's
integrated.
definitely an element of that, isn't there? It's like, okay, this is cool, but I'm not going to use it just because it's cool and it impressed me the first few times.
Right.
It's got to integrate.
If you've still got a bunch of work to do to integrate it with the end goal, to set it, if in the webinar case, if you're um using it to do stuff and to set up some of your settings, but then you've still got to go into the webinar platform and do that yourself. There's a limit to how much it's helping, but the more that people build it into this kind of software and the platforms that we use, I think it will almost be there in the background as time goes on. We kind of seen the same in video, like the tools that we use the most for, the AI tools that we're using the most for video are the ones that are getting built into Adobe. So we use the Adobe Creative Suite for video production, and they've been gradually adding AI features over the last few months. Started out with text-based editing and transcription, auto transcription, stuff like that. They've now got in beta testing, they've now got generative images, generative video, so that you can fill out the background of a shot or remove items that you don't want, and like use generative fill to block, fill in the gaps. That's going to get built into the Adobe Suite. So there have been tools around to do that kind of thing, but they've been clunky and difficult to use because it's been, you've had to like go to a third party thing and like upload your video to some website and then download it again, and all that kind of stuff. So that getting built into the tools that we're using anyway, obviously we're going to use it because it's right there. So I think that's where
Yeah.
more and more of these use cases are going to reveal themselves.
Yeah, so I think the so with just on Adobe, that's one of the best use cases in terms of webinar production, webinar workflows. We do a lot of post-event promotion. If you can get the sort of transcript from straight from Adobe, if you can get the subtitles in other languages, I don't know how's it doing with translating subtitles and things like that at the moment. Is it that far ahead or?
Yeah, it's not too bad. Um, we've used it a little bit for transcription. Well, for transcription we do use it. For translation, it's a little trickier because we're always going to want to have a quality check on that sort of thing anyway before we publish it. Um, and particularly with technical content, with scientific content, we're going to want to run it past a subject matter expert in that language because not everything translates directly. Um, but certainly some of the AI translation tools, uh, because of how they're trained, like they seem to be doing a better job than old-fashioned auto translation, sort of Google Translate style thing. Um, when it comes to getting technical terms right in the target language,
Yeah,
because not everything translates directly. Sometimes people don't bother translating things at all; just use the English term. Yeah, there's a wide variety of different ways that can go wrong. So we always, want to have someone who is a technical expert and a native speaker um, review anything like that in different languages. And yeah, the AI thing, because it's trained on the actual content that is that exists in that language, it seems to be like a bit better at that than traditional tools, which is nice. Um, but even just as an editing thing, if you're sort of looking through something like a webinar or a podcast where you've got like potentially an hour of content to sift through, and if you're looking for clips or if you're looking to just tidy things up or look for gaps where there was some sort of technical pause or whatever, and you want to like remove that, being able to scan through a quick transcription, even if it's not perfect, but it happened automatically and it happened pretty much instantly, that just saves so much time versus combing through stuff manually. Like there's a big help there. I've said in the previous podcast when we were talking about video production that we would often get transcriptions of videos anyway, particularly longer interviews. We get it transcribed first just because it's sometimes easier to comb through and pick out interesting bits
yeah.
in text than it is to go through watching a 40-minute, 50-minute video trying to remember where the good bits were and what ties together. Like you can make links and find clips that you can pull together much more easily in text. And that's built into Premiere now. So it's just removed a whole loop of like going to a transcription service and coming back basically.
Yeah, it is. That is one of the main features we've found. So, a lot of the time previously, if I'm hosting or moderating an event, I'm trying to think ahead, thinking what are the best snippets going to be for the on-demand promotion whilst it's happening live. But I'll always either not have the pen ready or I'll start writing down, then I'll get distracted about when it finishes because you're trying to do too many things at once. So we had somebody else in the back end who started doing that.
Yeah.
Um, but now it is obviously a lot easier. And like you say, trying to find the key points from text is often easier than rewatching the whole thing, especially if you've already seen it, to
Yeah.
keep concentrating whilst you're rewatching. And the other thing that was sort of pretty interesting, another use case would be if you're pre-recording a lot of, well, at least the bulk of your webinar productions or the presentation, let's say.
Mhm.
Adobe's got some pretty good sort of audio correct AI tools now that sort of you don't have to be super experienced video producers to use. How have you found them? Have you used them much or
Yeah, yeah,
pretty good?
those are pretty good. Again, that's another one of the AI-based tools that they've come out with, and the AI part of it is sort of even less visible. It's even more kind of in the background there because they've used machine learning to train the audio optimization algorithms that they're using. But as a user, you basically just take a couple of options and like adjust a slider until it sounds right, and that's it. So all of the AI smarts has happened in the back end basically. Um, so that yeah, it's even less so than with the text based stuff. It's just kind of the fact that it's AI based doesn't really matter. It's just built into the tool, and it's made the tools better. Um, and yeah, that's great. I mean, we use sort of third party um, like audio restoration tools sometimes when we have sort of subpar audio recordings, either from noisy environments, or if it's a remote recording, people don't have great microphones, stuff like that. Um, and the times when we have to go to those to get the result we want is definitely lessened because you can do more. You get better results just with the built-in tools.
Yeah, because
Um,
it is
right in
painful when
Premiere.
people turn up and even though you've told them to have some sort of mic and headphones set up and things like that,
Yeah, yeah.
it's not always gonna happen. So,
Yeah.
yeah, anything you can
Even
do
when
to
they do, like some there's stuff that they can't do much about, like the room they're in is kind of reverby, or the best mic they've got is still, it's not, if it's still just like a laptop mic or a headset, like it's not fantastic. You get a clear enough recording, but it's like it could be better,
yeah.
and that's something interesting that the AI can do. They've trained it on a bunch of subpar microphones and laptop mics and stuff, and a bunch of good audio, and it can sort of do a really, really detailed, way more in much more detail than you do manually. It can sort of process that audio to just make it more like the good audio.
Hmm. Yeah, we had a
That's
good
really
use case a few months back. There was one of the speakers was we were pre-recording the presentation webinar, but she was basically her office was next to a train line, and the whole office was next to a train line. She couldn't do anything about it apart
Mhm.
from go home, I suppose, and record it from there. But and it was quite regular as well, so we couldn't just stop every time. Otherwise, we'd have been there for hours. But
Yeah,
we were able to sort of cancel that out in the background. The end result, you could barely tell there was even a train in the when we were recording it live though. It was so loud, so it goes to show
yeah,
what you
yeah,
can do with the sort of post production and why it's a
yeah,
benefit.
absolutely. And it'll be interesting, whether any of that stuff, as it gets better and as the algorithms get smarter, whether that gets built into the live event platforms, into the actual webinar platforms, so you can have live audio processing. Obviously, that's a different challenge. A lot of the sort of advanced background noise reduction and stuff like that runs offline because it can't keep up with real time audio. Um, but you could use these companies could use AI to develop the models more, to develop the algorithms to make them more efficient, so that they can run in real time. And then maybe we'll see that stuff like that becomes less of an issue because it's recorded better in the first place because it's noise reduced live.
Yeah,
So yeah, you don't have that off-putting thing as well. You mentioned before about having, when you're hosting a webinar, you've got 6 different things to do at once, and having someone else to do stuff like uh, make note of like interesting promotional clips, like good sound bites. Maybe also some of the audience interaction as well, or the audience engagement stuff. People are asking questions, and it's good to have uh, sort of production staff in the background that can keep an eye on that, so that you can, if you're hosting, you can sort of follow the main conversation. Have you tried any sort of AI chatbot type things to help with that, and sort of uh, interact with the audience, or do any of that background work so that you don't need to have another 1 or 2 people doing those kind of background tasks?
yeah. So yeah, not yet is the answer to the question, but if I just quickly explain what we typically have in the back end. So we'd have the speakers, obviously, who are answering the questions or presenting. We'd have a moderator, typically myself, and then someone from our team who's sort of back end support in case anything happens to my connection. Also helps with other things in the back end. And then we'll usually have a subject matter expert from the client as well, who's vetting questions as they come in, sending questions through to the speakers, so they've got sort of time to prepare. So yeah, that is quite a few things that are going on in the back end, whilst you're obviously in front of a live audience as well. So you want to make sure that everything's working smoothly. So what we are sort of looking at and what we hope we'll be able to start offering fairly soon is chatbots who can do a lot of the audience engagement stuff, running the polls. When someone downloads a particular handout, suggesting another handout that might also be relevant to them based on the one they've just downloaded,
Mhm.
encouraging them to contribute to the Q&A if they haven't asked questions, things like that. If they want to just ask a question to the chatbot rather than to the people speaking, but it can still be recorded and sent back to us, all things like that, that I think will be good use cases, just trying to make the audience experience as interesting as possible. That's sort of how we're looking at it at the moment. Um, just to go back to some of the other sort of ways we're using AI as well. So a lot of the things we just spoke about was sort of post production, or if we're
Yeah.
pre-recording, how we can sort of get the presentation part absolutely spot on for a live event. But pre-event, we've been trying out a couple of things. So we used we used Azo Science as a test a few months back. For those who don't know, Azo Science is a GPT that's based on the Azo network content, but supported by ChatGPT's sort of framework. I think I've explained that correctly. Will correct me if I'm just talking nonsense. But we
That
basically
sounds right.
we used it as a sort of an ideation case study use case. So we go through. Okay, I'm planning to do a webinar on this subject. Can you give me ideas for a title? Okay, great. And then give me an abstract for this event. And we basically went through everything you would need to get an event set up. I can't remember the topic we used as a case study, but we had it tested with a sort of a subject expert, and they were pretty impressed with the results it came back with. Even things like, okay, I'm going to plan my registration form now. What 2, 3 data points would be most useful for me and my company selling this product and for my sales team? So everything you need to sort of think about when you're planning and prepping the event, it was very helpful in that sense. Obviously, still involves some human input, human editing as well. But when you're
Yeah.
just tasked with, okay, by next week, we need to get a title, an abstract, key learning objectives, registration questions, it's a lot. And again, it's moving parts because you have to speak to your speakers, you have to get their input. But if you can go to them with, okay, we've got this sort of general idea to start with, what do you think? Where can we improve this? Again,
Mhm.
that helps time.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the best use cases I've found as well for video production is just beginning a video script. Obviously, a lot of the stuff we do, as with the webinars, like the fairly technical topics, and getting up to speed enough to be able to know what to talk about and what the key points are is just made so much quicker when you can bounce a few questions off. Something like Azo Science that has the sort of the scientific knowledge in the background that you can just quickly go through. It saves a lot of reading and a lot of thinking time, for sure, just to get over that initial hurdle of like, right, what are we even talking about? What's important? What can we, as you say, what can we pull out as like the main topics, main objectives that are going to be important? So that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
So I also sometimes I'll have it running during live events. So if there's a subject that I've basically known very little about, I'll have it
mhm.
to ask questions during a live event so I can get sort of high level knowledge. Yeah. So basically in live events, I'll have Azo Science up on my screen. So if there's any subject which I don't know anything about, I basically be asking it questions to just so I can be as informed as possible during that discussion, so I can contribute and sort of go back and forth with the person asking the questions rather than just read the question listed out. I can try and make the conversation more engaging that way.
Yeah, you can respond to the flow of the conversation, not just rely on your prep.
Yeah, so if you ever see me looking away and then looking at the screen, it's because I'm trying to read. That's what's happening.
Yeah,
Um,
that's interesting. And that'd be interesting as well to see if we can get, as you say, have more sort of chatbot like features built in, um, whether an AI would be able to follow like a live transcription and suggest questions as you go, so you wouldn't have to be as distracted. It would almost prompt you like it might do with the audience members. Whether we could get it to say, "Oh, yeah, that's a good point to follow up," or this section is going to is going towards one of the key objectives or something that you can pull in. That kind of um, help could be really good. You were saying you use it for some of the maybe like the form fill, the sort of questions that we could ask, things like that. Can you also use it for the follow up then as well when you do the same kind of thing where you're asking people about their experience and sort of following up afterwards after the webinar? And maybe for data analysis as well, if you get like when you have the data of like, okay, what's all the questions that have been asked and stuff like that, because there's such a wide variety of input that you can get, that can be quite a slog to sort of trawl through and figure out like what's the useful learnings we can get from that in terms of what the client needs to see. Does it help on that side of things as well?
so yeah, it does. So we're quite fortunate because we in within our sort of reporting platform, we've built in pretty robust sort of animated reports for for the client, so they can see all the sort of the high level stuff and visualize it pretty easily. If they want to get into the weeds of the data, yes, it can be useful. We don't put any sort of personalized information into any sort of LMM at the moment, just purely because we're not 100% confident on the sort of how it's being used. I
Mm.
mean, I think we all know how it's being used, but
Yeah.
we yeah, you've got to be a little bit conscious of that. But if you've got anonymized data, then yeah, absolutely, you
Mhm.
can use it for the analysis. um in terms of the follow, what I love is the fact that we can use things like, okay, this, whatever trigger's been done in an event itself, we can set sort of personalized responses to that. So if they've answered the poll in this way, it can trigger a email to be sent to them half an hour after the event with more information about whatever it is they've just answered the poll and things like that.
Mhm.
So I think, like we were saying earlier, there'll be more AI tools built into the platforms themselves that will make the experience of moderating the experience of the audience better over time. Um, so yeah, that's where we're spending a lot of our attention, is how these platforms are developing. I think we've got a meeting with another company tomorrow to see, they've got some pretty cool stuff in the pipeline as well. So it'll be interesting to see what they've got. The thing you were telling me about the call in stuff that they've got, that sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. It's a platform that lets essentially audience members join the conversation to ask a question, so they can actually ask it live. Um, and they do a sort of it's not a chatbot as such, but there is a sort of automated. No, it's not an AI chatbot, but there is a sort of simple automated chatbot. If they want to ask a live question, that sort of runs them through checking their mic and their webcam, and then asking them for their question, so that it can then, so that, as the moderator or the producer, um, the whole thing arrives and goes, "This person is ready to ask the question.
Yeah,
Here's the question. Do you want to let them in?" And then you can just decide to admit them basically at the right time. So yeah, you'd have to have, like, again, a whole other sort of background producer sort of talking to them on a side call to sort of get all that ready, and that's all taken away. Um, and yeah, initially, obviously, the standard thing at the moment is a fairly easy, just sort of, here are the instructions. But you can imagine how an AI chatbot might be able to, if they have any actual technical questions, or if they, um, if there's any actual problems there where it might, they might struggle, like that could actually potentially answer some questions. Like, it could have an FAQ sort of ready to go.
yeah.
Um,
And
which
quite
is
often,
really
well,
powerful.
you do, people can, if we've got an hour booked, people don't have always can't stay on, so the Q&A will often overrun.
Mhm.
Um, and what we usually do is usually just carry on the Q&A until the speaker needs to leave. But you can see in the drop-off stats, most people have to go on the hour because they've got the next appointment, or what have you. If you've got a chatbot helping with those questions,
Mhm.
then all of a sudden a load more of the audience are getting their questions answered live, which can only be a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, I think in terms of audience engagement. One thing I was sort of been thinking about a bit this week, I don't know if you saw that Ray-Ban and Meta they've just released the new version of the latest version of the sort of Meta Ray-Ban glasses. I was wondering how audiences will be sort of experiencing webinars in a couple of years. Will it still be at the computer? Will be people through their glasses? I'm not sure the Apple headsets going to take off like commercially for now, just because purely 'cause it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it got me thinking about how people will be experiencing online events in 2, 3, 5 years' time. Have you got any
Definitely. Yeah.
thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think, yeah, with the Apple Vision headset, I think, yeah, like as it is now, it's extremely expensive. It's quite large. It's quite clunky. It's a really cool toy.
Looks cool, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah. But I think, as with, you think about like the first iPod or the first iPhone, um, they weren't necessarily the most powerful tools. They weren't incredible. They were, but it set the tone for like where technology was going to go over the next like decade. Um, and I think that's more what we're seeing here. Like, this isn't the best it's going to get at all. This is the very first one. This is like testing the waters. As with the other things as well, the VR headsets, even like back when Google had like the Google Glasses thing, that was really just experimenting and seeing what kind of things were possible. Um, and yeah, the Apple thing and yeah, the Ray-Ban Meta stuff, this is you can see kind of where it's going to go. And I think that will become maybe not in a couple of years, but like in like 5 to 10 years, I think that's gonna start to be, um it's gonna get more affordable so more people can do it, and the actual experience will mature and people will figure out how to develop, sort of UIs for it better.
Yeah,
Um, and yeah, something like a webinar actually is, uh, as that technology matures, that's almost an ideal use case as a viewer because it is something that's quite good. It's a long format, um, sort of event, and you're quite likely to be doing something else at the same time. Like it might be quite good to be able to do some other work, or be it around the house or around the office, or like maybe have something else going on and be able to do that, but not being away, not feeling like you're away from the event, feeling like you can still engage with it, you can still ask questions, you can still look at what's going on.
yeah.
So yeah, that'll be really interesting to see how that develops.
I also thought from a presenter's point of view, so the Meta Ray-Ban glasses is obviously the camera. You can set the camera to basically show what's around you, what's in front of you. So
Mhm.
it's possible that something like that could be used to do demonstrations in your lab and things like
Yeah.
that. Um, I don't know, I think we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Most people aren't going to be doing this in the next few years, like you say. But it is interesting to think about where this could all
Yeah, I
where
think
this could all go.
that's definitely a very likely trajectory, and it's worth bearing in mind that like how is this all going to play into that? And I think yeah, something like we're talking about sort of how can we use the tools that are new or that are developing now? How can we use those to improve the audience experience? Um, Ultimately, that's probably where the audience experience is going. So it's worth having that in mind as an end goal that like people are likely to be, um, and in something like the Apple Vision workspace where you can have multiple windows dotted around the room, like the webinar might be over there somewhere, you know, while you're doing something else. But then if uh, if the chatbot knows that that person's interested in a certain topic, maybe it could like ping it or notify them when that topic's coming up. You know, that kind of thing, might make that experience really, you know, a lot better.
Yeah, and then
Which is
clip
really
that
interesting.
bit if they're not on the live call, clip
Yeah,
that bit up and
yeah.
send them
If
that
if
clip of
they've
that
left
video.
or if they dismiss it and go, no, I'm busy right now, I can't listen to it. Then it will send them a clip later like that. Um, that could be yeah. You can see how it dovetails in with that sort of experience, with that sort of way of consuming things, that will eventually become more common.
Yeah. One of the other things, just going back to the sort of the workflows and um, looking at how we might be able to use AI in the sort of on-demand promotion of things.
Mhm.
Have you tried any of these avatar things yet, where you can basically get an avatar of you as a presenter, and it can translate into another language, and you can sound like you're speaking French and Spanish? They look a bit well. The ones I've checked out, they some of them look promising, some of them look a bit rubbish to still. I think there's definitely some privacy issues with these platforms, but
Yeah,
it
yeah.
could be something that people look at if they do have clients in various markets. It's a possibility, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think the internationalization thing is probably the most obvious use case. Um, but also for personalized stuff, like you're saying, the more personalized follow up things. If we know what someone's interested in, we know what questions they've asked. Um, Sending them personalized clips is something that would be really interesting. But also, what if you then involve the avatar as well? You could have content that's tailored for them. Um, that's sort of generated, even if it's not in another language. So yeah, there's definitely again there's something really interesting there. The stuff we've seen so far, the examples, yeah, I've not seen anything where I've gone, wow, we have to use that. It's all a little bit experimental and a bit fun. It's all particularly like for a professional setting.
Yeah,
It's all sort of quite fun, cartoony stuff that like in some markets that'll work. It's not going to really get taken seriously I think, in our space for a while, but it's definitely interesting to see where that's going. Where like it's another way of delivering content um, that could be really interesting, could be really powerful.
yeah. It was basically what we were saying at the start. Isn't it? There's a lot of hype about a lot of these platforms, a lot of the softwares that are coming out.
Hmm.
Um, Some of them look interesting. Some of them are effective now. So some of the ones we've talked about, the things in
Yeah.
Adobe are very helpful for your webinar workflow. Your ASO Science or ChatGPT is very useful for ideation and in general getting your sort of text parts of your process in shape. Opus is the one, I don't think we mentioned it, but one we use for social snippets, pulls
Yeah.
out the 30-second highlight videos. I remember when we first used that a year ago, and it was pretty poor, the quality that came out, and
Yeah.
the from there to now is sort of night and day, isn't it? So
Yeah, definitely. And Opus is another one that's based on OpenAI, so that's got better as ChatGPT has got better. Basically, now it's based on GPT-4. Um, the interpolation it can do of the sentiment and the themes in a long form piece of text uh, is really good. It's genuinely very
yeah,
good at picking out interesting points. Where it wasn't before. It was like, yeah, okay, I kind of see why you've picked that, but it's not what I would have done. Now it's like, yeah, no, that seems fine. You can you can pretty, it'll give you 10, and 4 of them will be great straight out the box. Which is super useful. Um, you were saying before, we've mentioned about the sort of data privacy issues around some of these, and I think again that's something that's going to evolve. Like some of these brand new tools that come out and like are all hyped and sort of exciting, um, because they're in their sort of experimental phase. A lot of them are designed or aimed at really personal use most of the time. Um, it's a standalone app or a website that you upload your stuff to, and it's they're storing all the data, and they're not really thinking about enterprise level data handling. As part of that, you don't really know what they're doing with it, whether they're just using it to train their models, whether they're selling it to other people to train models, whether they're just selling it straight to advertisers. Like, there's no disclosure around any of that. Um, so yeah, that's the other thing that I think, uh, as we've found, just talking about talking through some of the things we can think of doing, you're like, but we wouldn't be able to upload the data to that. It's sort of holding back what we can do. I think that's going to change as more enterprise level platforms build the tools into their service, and they already have the sort of data practice behind the scenes that you can trust, or that's easier to arrange trust. Like
yeah, yeah.
there's more sort of contracts in place and things.
Yeah, I think
Um,
just on that, I mean, yeah, obviously before you delve into any AI technology, make sure your company will probably have an AI policy. If not, then maybe recommend they get one and then follow that,
yeah,
obviously. But yeah, just be a bit conscious of what it is you're sharing with the models. But I think we're in agreement. The big sort of software providers are going to build these into their platforms, and that will take away some of those issues for sort of enterprise companies.
yeah, for sure. That's something that's been part of what Adobe's done as well, uh, on the generative image front. And generative video, they're training those models on their stock image and stock footage libraries that they already have the rights to. Um, I have seen as well that they were trialing some sort of compensation scheme where they were trying to measure uh, when so artists that have submitted footage or submitted images to the library, they were trying to measure when the model was generating something that was using their training data, and then compensating them like a little trickle of a few pennies based on how much it got used. Don't know how effective that is. I don't know. Don't know how much money it's going to get anyone.
That seems
But
like it's open to interpretation.
yeah, so it's not super transparent about how that works or whether it works at all. But the fact they're even doing that, and they've published the fact that they are sort of working on that sort of system, means they're thinking about it. They know it's an issue. They know people are going to be concerned about. Okay, I'm generating images. Like, who owns the right to the training set? Where's that come from? Is it crawling Google Images, and we're going to get in trouble down the line for copying an image from somewhere that we shouldn't have? Um, and yeah, keeping at least that Adobe has acquired the rights with the original content creators to use it for training, and they're attempting some sort of system to compensate them. That's about as much as you can hope for at the moment, but it's certainly much better than you go from like just googling AI image generator and just hoping that it's fine.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Like, so I know there's a lot of backlash with various image generators. So what you're saying about Adobe there is obviously useful for that. But just on the key considerations for data privacy, ethical implications, things like that. Yeah, make sure you've got an AI policy in place, and yeah, just be conscious of who and what you're sharing.
Yeah, definitely. I think um, yeah, I think most companies that are looking at this will have some sort of policy, but yeah, I think uh, opening it up and letting your staff just use whatever tool they want is basically, just as dangerous as it would be in any other sense. Just because it's AI, it doesn't make it any different. You wouldn't do that with any other kind of service where you're uploading data either. So,
Yeah,
yeah, I think that's a good approach. Um, so just to kind of wrap up, then, what are what are some places that people who are producing webinars or people that are putting webinars together, where can they go to learn more about how AI could help? What are there any resources that you use to sort of find new tools or learn about how to use them?
yeah. So your whichever if you're using a software, a webinar software, they'll likely put out pretty useful stuff. So we use a company called Big Marker, so I'm constantly following their updates. On 24 again, they're a big player in the sort of webinar software, so they've got really useful stuff. I think they're probably going to be the sort of the front runner in terms of building AI models into their software. So definitely one to watch there. Um, of course, we publish stuff about our webinars. Like I said earlier on, we're in a pretty cool position where we can try things out, and we will continue to do so. We'll keep trying new things as they come. We'll publish about them if we think it's worth publishing, if it's useful to marketers working in science, engineering, etc. So we will always publish that. And of course, if you want to speak directly with myself, then please just get in touch on LinkedIn, and we can chat about anything webinar related.
Excellent. All right, thanks a lot. That's been a great discussion.
Cheers, Will. Appreciate it.